2012 meeting of the Successor Agency. May we have a roll call, please?
Board members: Friedman.
Here.
Manukian.
Here.
Najarian.
Here.
Weaver.
Here.
Chair Quintero.
Here. May we have your report?
Agenda for the May 29, 2012 regular meeting of the Glendale Successor Agency was posted on Thursday, May 24, 2012 on the bulletin board outside City Hall.
What's next?
Next is the approval of minutes.
Second.
Second.
Minutes stand approved as submitted. Next, please.
Next is oral communication. There were cards submitted. Same
There were
rules
cards
apply as they did
submitted.
to the Housing Authority regarding 5 minutes allotted time.
Okay, the Glendale Successor Agency. Oral communications is Herbert Milano, followed by Aram Kazazian.
Mayor Quintero, members of the Successor Agency. I'd like to make some comments of an experience that I had recently, and I hope that this is within the purview of this Successor Agency. I had a call from the Pasadena Weekly asking my background and information that I could provide with regard to the Americana at Brand. And for the past few years, I have been doing a mildly cursory look at the performance of the Americana's financials, because under the agreement that the redevelopment agency had, the city has a participation on the profits of the Americana. Ergo, the city needs to obtain those financial reports. So if it is still within the purview of this agency to ask the question as to whether those documents could be released, I've received those documents through the California Public Records Act every single year, except that this year I've been told that they would not be released because they are now considered confidential. Part of my goal is in trying to determine what is the overall financial benefit that the city is obtaining from the Americana at Brand, particularly in trying to assess information from other sources as to the property tax revenues, sales tax revenues, and any potential participation that may occur out of the net income from the Americana. In years past, from my calculations, I don't believe that we have been able to meet even the interest on the $48 million bond, let alone a true return on investment of the $84 million that the city invested in the subsidy that it gave Ray Caruso. So it is my hope that that this agency can perhaps provide some guidance to the city attorney's office so that we can have a release of the financial statements of the Americana, because I don't believe that anyone else really is doing any type of evaluation on how that investment, that in my opinion was well over $100 million worth of property, really is impacting financially as a net revenue source the city of Glendale. Thank you very much.
Aram Kazazian.
So my name is Aram Kazazian. It's very disturbing that I have to come here today because I have some issues, some problems. I believe that we need a full impact report on parking and traffic study on the 3 projects that we have, which is going to be creating a large problem. One is the Lambley Theater. One is the apartments over here, the 200 I don't know if it's just 238 units or 245 units. There's different conflict of information I have. And the other one is the hotel. Now, the hotel was originally approved years ago when I supported that hotel strongly with all the neighbors.
Which hotel is that, Mr. Kazazian?
That's the Marriott Hotel in the corner of Wilson and Central. That's going to be built.
Okay.
Now, that particular building is going to be taking out 60 public parking spaces. And I know these people for the last 37, 40 years. I know the Hanessian, Vache, I know Zavin Hanessian, I know Costa Shivaya, and they're good friends of mine, but I didn't say anything that day over here 2 weeks ago when I first found out about it because I just was very disturbed when I saw what's going on. Now, that particular building was approved originally, Design 1, Design 2 concept, with a total of 337 parking spaces, which included a 60 parking space public parking on the premises free for the public. That's the way the hotel was approved. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks ago, that was brought over here to City Council without any notice to any of the public, the newspapers, the surrounding 500 feet or 1,000 feet of the businesses, residences in that particular area, which they had received original notice on it before. And the parking, they claim they reduced it down to 54, which I come to find out that's not even correct. The parking is reduced down to 39, exactly 39 parking spaces. It's not even 54. They claim 54, they brought in front of you 54. It's only 39 parking spaces. On one level, 39 parking spaces. They said the rest of the parking will be on the aisles. That's how they came up with 54. They could park by shoving cars on the aisleways. That's not parking. Now, 337 parking spaces. I came up with the 337 parking spaces is with 173 guest rooms. Each one city code requires one parking. That gives you 173 parking spaces. Then you have commercial space. You have restaurant space. You have banquet rooms. You have conference rooms. All those additional parking spaces it takes. So we are 281 parking spaces short, plus the discrepancy between 54 and 39. So I'm about almost 300 parking spaces short we are on a hotel. What's that going to do to the neighborhood? Yes, they're going to pay $1,200. $1,200. What are you going to do? You're going to put a parking structure? You're going to buy some property next door and put a parking structure on it? No, let them keep the $1,200, give us 2 more parking spaces. I mean, I don't mind if they reduce it a little bit, but reducing down from 337 parking space to 39, it's a big, huge drop. That I believe it requires a environmental impact report for say. It's unbelievable. It's mind-boggling. This could be approved that way. I'm sorry. I mean, I've been trying 2 weeks to rationalize myself what I can do, but I haven't come up with any rationality. They say, okay, we're going to lease 74 spaces down at the Maryland parking structure. Okay, how long is the lease for? Are they willing to pay it for the lease for next 100 years ahead of time? What happens if they stop paying for the lease? Nobody has seen their development agreement. Okay, so they pay for 1 year, 2 years, then they don't pay. Okay, let people park in the streets wherever they want to park. I have a building right there, that I built back in early 70s. I mean, I built with sufficient parking. I built 2 parking spaces per unit when I built it. That's barely even sufficient now. And they're going to put, all these units coming up. When I'm saying 2 parking is not sufficient, they're going to build it with 1 parking on apartment buildings, especially with the Lambley Theater. That's even worse. Wilson is going to be bombarded. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's the last card for oral communications. Mr. City Attorney, I assume the first speaker will be provided with the financials on the Americana?
To the extent that we have them, they've been prepared by us, yes. I think there was a confusion as to what was asked, but we're following up on that.
Okay, and then the second speaker.
Actually, I'd like to get a copy of those as well.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, every August, this agency had asked staff to prepare the analysis that Mr. Milano is asking for. We did that in 2008, 2010, and 2011. Those reports have been presented here to the agency. They have also been provided to Mr. Milano. Beyond that, I'm not sure what else we can do to give you a financial return from the agency's investment. As we noted in each one of the reports, much of the reason the agency did this was not necessarily financial, but more to the elimination of blight and achievement in certain social goals in objectives.
Well, what we're interested in are the financials, so that answers the question. The second speaker spoke about, we did duly notice the meeting, correct?
Yes.
In terms of, okay, and then I would recommend that the speaker also talk to Mr. Hagani, who can talk about our parking strategic plan, if you will, and the number of spaces would have to be leased by the hotel, et cetera.
Question.
Manukian.
I do remember that project, and when that project started, and Mr. Kazian makes a good point, was that the 60 parking spaces were to be replaced, or they were to build additional parking where the public would have access to it. Is that gone away at this point? Is that what happened? So we no longer have the 60 public spaces because of the approval?
I can't confirm the number, but it is an underutilized lot. There are frequently one or two cars there.
But that wasn't my question. My question was, I recall when we made the deal, when we were starting to make the deal back in 2006, 2007, in a public forum, the point at that time was that they were going to replace the 60 parking spaces, whether utilized or not utilized, but those are public parking spaces that were to be replaced.
The request was made of the agency to change that policy, and the agency, in fact, said, no, they do not need to be replaced.
Okay. So there won't be any public parking spaces over there?
Not per se. Public can park there, but they won't be public parking spaces, as you would in a garage like we have.
Right. So there, I mean, you keep throwing these words out there, per se or not per se. There's a
No.
parking lot, public parking lot there, and they were going to replace the parking spaces or have it available to the parking in what they were going to build. At this point, there will not be any available.
That is correct.
And,
I mean-
and this agency voted for that?
How many parking places are there in the public garage half a block away there on Orange? What's the number of spaces
I
there?
want to say there's 625 spaces in that garage.
How many spaces is the hotel going to be providing? Is it 53, 54? Is that it?
I believe the number is 56 on-site. They will pay a parking in lieu fee for an additional 56, and then they will lease 74 spaces for the length of their ground lease.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next, please.
Agency member or staff comment?
Any staff comments or? No. Such comments? Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick comment. We learned today from the Department of Finance that they have approved all of the items on our recognized obligation payment schedule with the exception of two, and they are two very important ones. The first one is the loan from the city to the redevelopment agency, and that repayment, it's approximately $6 million this year. The other item that they disallowed was the set-aside of 20% for affordable housing. It has been our position that that portion of the law was not repealed with AB 26, and therefore the obligation still remains. But other than that, for this next 6-month period, they have approved that using various sources of funding, including cash, bond proceeds, and then from the property tax.
So what were they? What were the approved projects on the list?
Now you've got me. There's some 100 and I think there's even more than that. There's
What
probably
are the big
100.
ones, I guess? Give me the most.
Well, they approved things like our bond payments. They approved our capital improvements, the library project, the Central Avenue. They approved the Paseo for the Museum of Neon Art.
Which Paseo, the scaled-down Paseo or the nice Paseo?
The original.
The full original design Paseo. They approved those items that were being funded in that 6-month period. They are pre-development costs. They're not the big ticket, like $10 million. So we're
Oh, wait.
optimistic that those will stay.
Wait a minute. So this is just the pre-development costs, not the larger construction.
Correct.
The reason why we're not doing kind of spiking the football touchdown dances, because they are approving these elements.
I was wondering why.
Yeah, no, what you will see in our ROPS, as Phil indicates, are the smaller ticket items that between the smaller ticket items on pre-development costs and our large indebtedness payments get to a certain threshold, which kind of keeps in line with the narrative that the state is going to allow us to not default on those third-party transactions that might trigger a constitutional takings, with maybe a little bit of juice on top of that, but not give us anything else. So my guess would be that when if they approve the design work for the Mona Paseo, when the actual time came to build the Mona Paseo, they would look at that price tag and say, now we're going to disallow that. Now, our argument would be, well, you've already allowed it on the initial ROPS, so doesn't that hold that subsequent payments thereafter would be allowed? Now, that may ultimately be the case if what the state of California wants is to get local governments out of the property tax collection business, i.e. former redevelopment, and allow us just to keep cash on hand and bond proceeds. If that's the case, well, at least that's a much saner way to wind down redevelopment. We don't know that that's the case as yet, and therein lies some of the problem that we have, why we're still moving forward with litigation in part, and really kind of speaks to the mixed messages coming out of State Controller's Office, Attorney General's Office, Department of Finance, County Auditor Controller. Nobody seems to be on the same page, except that apparently the Attorney General has come down and smacked Department of Finance and Controller, saying you have to go by what 26 said. And 26, for all of its flaws, did say only a handful of things. And the interpretation of 26 as applied is what is causing us the greatest heartburn. So kind of good news in terms of them approving much of the ROPS, but not entirely or very good news, because we're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
What are your initial comment regarding the loan payback to the city? What are the financial ramifications of disallowing that loan payment to the city?
Well, the $15.4 million gap in the general fund, $6 million of that is the redevelopment agency repayment. So that has a very real and immediate impact on us.
So that does not increase our deficit to $21 million?
It does not. We've already factored
it's
in.
It's part of the $15 million.
Council told us to assume worst case scenario, and we are.
Yeah, that's not a surprise that
Right.
went for the $6 million right off the bat.
And that's what the lawsuit is over as well.
One of the issues, correct.
One of the issues. So people think that the lawsuit is about keeping redevelopment alive. It's not. It's about this loan that the city made to the redevelopment agency, which now the state won't allow the redevelopment agency to pay back to the city. And I think that's wrong, and I'm glad that we are suing the state over that, because I don't believe, given the legislation, that was something that the legislation as adopted, that the bill spelled out.
Do we know where we were? Were we the third city to get a ruling, the fifth, the 10th? We don't.
Mr. Chair, members of the successor agency, it looks like we were somewhere about halfway, based on what we've been able to guess from reviewing the DOF website, that approximately half of the agencies across the state have received answers when we got ours.
Any other comments? Okay, next, please.
So moved.
We are adjourned. The Glendale Successor Agency is adjourned. We'll now turn to the special meeting of the Glendale City Council, May 29th, 2012. May we have a roll call,